Yes, we're ready. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for tuning into our session. It's not loss, it's opportunity. My name is Carol Wilson, and I'm the Lunder Education Chair at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And on behalf of the Smithsonian, I want to welcome you to this important discussion.
Thank you so much, Carol. So I'm Amy Galloway, and I'm the Alaska 2020 Teacher of the Year, and I am so grateful to be here with three other really talented and amazing educators. So I'm very grateful to be able to have this session while we're still in the middle of a pandemic. I know in Alaska, we're in the middle of a spike right now where we're at. And so this conversation about learning loss versus learning opportunity is very much still an ongoing conversation. And so I really look forward to everybody, what everybody has to say. And today is Constitution and Citizenship Day. And so I want to celebrate and wish everybody a happy Constitution and Citizenship Day. And I think it's a great intersection because I think when we talk about what our students and what our teachers experienced last year and the year before and this year, truly becoming an engaged citizen and seeing the world around them and how our governments are responding to this pandemic, how they're responding to issues of race and equity. And so what better day to have this conversation about learning opportunity than on Constitution Day? So I would like each of our three panelists to introduce themselves. And as you're introducing yourselves, if you also wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of why you chose to come back to the profession this year. Teachers, like every other profession, we are in high demand. We are in high demand, and we have a lot of teachers that left the profession after this last year. I want to thank you, the three of you, for staying in the profession. And so when you introduce yourself, if you also wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about why you chose to come back this year. And I think we'll start with Cindy.
Hello, I am Cindy Soul, the 2021 Maine Teacher of the Year. I teach in Portland, Maine, Maine's largest city. And I am thrilled to be here to share with you how through this time of loss, we have really been creative and innovative. And that's one of the driving reasons why I came back, is I'm so motivated by the energy. I recently heard the term creative abrasion, and I feel like in this world, like two things collided: this isolation from this pandemic and then the need for change in education. And it's creating, those two things are abrasive. Isolation due to a pandemic and creativity in education and schools don't typically go together. But when they collided, they're creating this beautiful energy. And I think we're going to move forward with hope. And I'm really excited that I'm in a leadership position as a literacy coach this year to do that work.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Okay, how about you, Anthony?
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are today. Really excited to be having this conversation with you all. My name is Anthony Coy Gonzalez. I'm a teacher at the Ohio School for the Deaf. I returned to education this year. I'm out of the classroom for a year working with the Department of Education to support some initiatives that affect our student population and profession. But I returned to education just because I think back to all of our students that continue showing up and the people who are there to help them succeed. And I think for teachers, we're able to see inside of our students and see the potential that they have, a lot of times potential that they don't see themselves. And so I returned to the profession this year just to continue seeing that in my students and to continue supporting them to their fullest potential possible.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for staying in the profession. And finally, Elisa.
Thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. Hola. I'm Elisa Cooper de Uribe. I'm the 2021 New Mexico Teacher of the Year. I'm a first grade Spanish immersion teacher at New Mexico International School in Albuquerque. And there was no question in my mind that I would return to the classroom this fall, in part because being and doing what I do, it really nourishes my sense of purpose. and that is to be a part of a community that values multilingualism. It's a part of my own family's life. We're a multilingual family, and my daughter is a student at our school, and I see that she and all of her classmates and our students, they need us, and they have so much to give, and I do too. So I'm back here to be a part of that.
Thank you so much, Elisa. So I think we're going to jump right into even really digging out and ripping apart kind of what do we mean when we say learning loss or learning opportunity? I know when the narrative first started coming out last year about what are we going to do next year when the kids with all the learning loss, and how are we going to address it, and how are we going to address it? And just about every teacher I know, all their hackles went up, and they're like, okay, we are not going to start that first day with our students from a deficit mindset, from they have lost something. And so I'd like to hear from each of you. What does learning loss versus learning opportunity mean in your classrooms and to your students and families? And why don't we start with Elisa?
Being an educator of really young students, all they know is learning opportunity. Some of their family members, they have seen a progression last year that was different from perhaps older siblings, but my students themselves, all they know is opportunity. So if we're thinking in our classroom about learning, it is all asset-based. And especially for my students and their perspective, really all they do is they bring to the table the opportunities that they want and the assets that they have. And so for me, going back into the classroom, it's very similar as it is in other years, in that what I'm looking at is the opportunity of the students arriving where they are at the level that they are. And I'm also in a really unique position to receive students each year who are coming with very significant assets and opportunities, but with a huge area of growth that we're working on. And in my case, it's second language learning. And so our school itself, and then also the families that bring their students to my room and the students themselves, they're really coming to our learning every year, regardless of a pandemic, with an opportunity to really engage in a lot of new learning. And I think that especially for them, it's all asset-based, because what they are doing is bringing the strengths that they have as learners to the table to learn something new. And so even though my classroom and the students, they are slightly different in terms of the types of assets and opportunities they're coming to the classroom with this year, it's very similar in that the approach that we have in our classroom and our school is all about significant opportunities that we're going to latch onto, regardless of what the year looks like at the beginning.
Thank you, Elisa. I think it's really powerful, that concept that we don't need to label kids as somehow being deficient because they're in a pandemic, that every year, this is what we do, right? We take kids where they're at and we address that. So, and I appreciate you also talking about those kind of opportunity gaps. So Cindy, how about you? How are you as a literacy coach, or the teachers you work with? What does loss versus opportunity mean in your classrooms?
Well, you had just referenced the opportunity gap, and as you know, we are in a pandemic, but we're also facing an epidemic of unfulfilled potential, of multi-generational low literacy achievement, scores that have not changed across our nation in 20 years, and 30% students who are students of color, students who face language barriers, students who experience trauma and poverty. And so Maine is beautiful, and the outside world is so engaging, and our readers and writers and speakers and listeners are so motivated to learn about the natural world. So in Portland, Maine, and across our state, we've created outdoor learning spaces. In my district, we created 156 outdoor learning classrooms across 17 schools. And it has been so enriching to our students And we also created at my elementary school, we created an extra special. So in addition to music and art and physical education, they have a garden teacher that takes them to our community garden once a week, and they each have jobs, and we've built, extra places for them to grow vegetables, and we're donating those. So they're also seeing like what Action can do for their community because they're donating those resources. And that's the other piece. Our community partners came into our school more than ever. So as we were doing this gardening work, we had people showing up with, amazing organic fertilized soil to add and manure and all those things the garden needs. And it was just really exciting to see us tap into the natural world and inspire students' curiosity.
That is really powerful, Cindy. You cut out a little bit there at the end, so I hope I didn't step on you. But as a follow-up, those learning classrooms, those outdoor classrooms, is that something that started before the pandemic and took off during the pandemic? Or how did the pandemic actually influence those outdoor learning classrooms? Oh, I think she might be frozen. Okay. All right. So then I'm going to go to Anthony. So Anthony, you're in a very, for many of us, I've met very few teachers who work solely with deaf students. So how did loss versus opportunity with the pandemic, what did that look like in your classrooms?
Sure. So each of my students, just for a little context, each of my students is on an IEP. So they're receiving an individualized education for components of their learning, which is really the goal for all of our students. And I think when we look at the effects of COVID and whether we're looking at it at an asset-based versus other models, really focusing on the strengths of the child and how we can take them from where they are to where we dream them to be, or to where they want to go in terms of their planning at different stages of life. So I think that's been a powerful piece. When COVID hit, we had a little newspaper from our elementary department, which learning English as a second language through sign language was really complex for them. But by pulling in some deaf mentors, by pulling in some members of the community through online opportunities, through Zoom, through using video services, we were really able to continue reaching out and being a part of the community and bringing the community in. So I think that's really looking at not only the assets within our students, but also the assets that we have and resources that we might not take full advantage of, similar to what Cindy had shared with some of the partnerships that have taken place.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Cindy, I love that we're experiencing, even in this session, what teachers experienced consistently all of last year and maybe some of the year before, and maybe some people are still online. So I appreciate the tech, what's happening. And if you have internet, I wanted to clarify, just go back quickly. Those outdoor classrooms, is that something that was an opportunity? Is that something that grew because of the pandemic, or had that always been there? Or can you explain how the pandemic impacted that a little?
It was totally because of the pandemic. We shifted a position from the outdoor learning coordinator, from our STEM.
No.
I'm going to turn my video off.
I think that's a great idea.
But I am in my school and this is unusual. So anyways, we got buckets donated from a local Italian restaurant shop. And so
we can hear you. Okay, well, why Cindy gets that. Okay,
I just saw the message that it was freezing on CVent. Okay, so, and students carry those buckets.
Okay, well, Cindy got muted, so I think we're gonna, Cindy and our tech people can figure that out, and hopefully she'll be back in here. So like looking at like what Cindy was talking about, the great opportunities that came out and the resources of the community that came together. There were, however, a lot of us in a lot of places that didn't have resources. I know in Alaska, I didn't have fast enough internet at my house to actually do online school. And so sometimes I sat in my car in the parking lot. Sometime, and then they finally opened the school and I could come in, and a lot of my students in Alaska struggled with that. So how do you, when there are so many barriers, like there were really a lot, and last year was hard. Like I don't want to candy or sugarcoat like how hard last year with opportunity, it was hard. So when it's really hard, how do you actually promote an asset mindset in your classroom? How do you overcome that? Especially both of you are also dealing with students where English is their second language, which for some could be seen as a barrier, right? I don't see it as one, but I know that some people could. So how do you promote an asset-based mindset in your classroom? And we'll start with Alisa.
Thanks, Amy. Yes, I will also concur that this has been challenging as a way to give us opportunity. But in thinking about the assets that my students bring, especially last year when we were in multiple different modalities of teaching, sometimes online, some in the classroom, sometimes a little bit of both. Really what we have been using is our International Baccalaureate Primary Years program as a lens and a framework to help students have both the vocabulary for talking about themselves as bringing assets and their peers as well. And then also for us to frame experiences, be they like short online or longer at home, that they can do more self-directed. But the knowledge that they have through this language they're learning has really been key to that. And so a few examples are actually most of my students are Spanish language learners. I do have some English language learners in my classroom. Some are bilingual, but the majority are Spanish language learners.
Oh,
and so these terms that we're using, such as being knowledgeable, being open-minded, being inquirers, that those are all really positive attributes that they are assigning to themselves. And through a variety of different songs and movements and activities that we're doing, those are applicable to academic learning, but then also to their own self-valuing and themselves as asset-based learners. And so we also have key concepts of ways of looking at the world, that things have a form, that things have a function. And so it really kind of takes the spotlight more off of what our sometimes arbitrary expectations are of students that can lead to a deficit mindset, and really looking at the foundation of what's important for any human being anywhere to be working towards as a human and as a learner. And so we did a lot of activities last year, and we continue to do so. And right now, with really framing our learning experiences around learner profile attributes.
That's very powerful. And, you know, when you talked about those arbitrary expectations, you know, yeah, we're going to come back to that and what we measure. So Anthony, how about you? How do you promote an asset-based mindset in the classroom?
So I think Alisa referenced something really important about developing that self-identity as part of your social emotional learning. And we know that that impacts your academic strengths and skills as well. For me, it's really pulling out some of those sometimes small successes and just really overdoing it with the celebration and the success of that small victory, and even creating unique or unconventional ways of giving students an opportunity to experience the success. Because our students a lot of times have gone through a lot of experiences where they don't feel successful. They don't feel as self-valued as we hope they would. And so creating those opportunities where they can experience it and say, oh, you know, I can do this. And then they'll apply that attitude toward other things. One example, and it's not academic, but it certainly had a huge impact on academics this year. We have a fifth grade charity business project every year. And I had a 5th grade student, shyest student I've ever had. She would hide in the back of the classroom, you know, as we get started, but she assured me that she would never speak to a middle schooler. That was like her hard line. So no matter what we did, that was the one thing that she was not going to do, is talk to middle schoolers. And so they created a cart. They were super resilient throughout the process and adapting it. So they had a food cart with tunnels where they would toss a water bottle. There was another tunnel for people to toss dollar bills, and we went carting around the school. Well, on the day of their turn for their team, her partner was absent, and he had promised her that he would speak to the middle school department. And so she had to go into the cafeteria, but with all of those small successes and celebrations along the way, more confident than I was, she stood on top of a chair and presented to the whole middle school their business proposal, and ended up raising like $200 for her charity business. And so I think when we are able to pick those things out and give them those opportunities to experience success, we'll definitely see that repaid in future successes.
What a powerful story. Make sure you tell the student that we were all, at least this teacher from Alaska was very impressed with her. Cindy, how about you? How do you and your teachers promote an asset-based mindset in your classroom?
So we're going to try this. I'm on my phone. Well, I think like many teachers, I believe our superpower is our belief in our students. And for me, it's translating that into every aspect of our classroom with clear conviction. And I alluded to engaging in relevant curriculum and with the science, integrating science into literacy to shift students' motivation because they're so excited about solving a phenomena. And so through inquiry, we bridge rigor with high expectations and joy. And students really are constructing and deconstructing knowledge. And through that process, they're able to bring who they are, their identity, their funds of knowledge, their unique experiences to that process of figuring out the phenomenon. And so they learn to see that their assets are different than others, and they learn to know who is the expert on. We did an exploration where we were figuring out if if solar energy was better experience in understanding systems, and they became like the mechanical expert when it came time for those inquiry projects. And another example of that is we have a problem with some of our trees and erosion on the hill behind our playground. And we noticed that, and we asked questions. And many students started thinking that the roots of a tree were sticks and that they were sticking up out of the ground. And by the end of it, they were able to explain, no, this is erosion. All students were able to explain, this is erosion. This is a problem. They presented to our principal that we needed to solve it. We got a community-based partner in here to bring in some mulch. They figured out a solution. And they enacted that, and that, you know, they learned so much about who they were and what parts they could contribute to that.
Wow, it sounds like Maine has some wonderful partnerships, and I love how you guys are just leveraging that outdoor world. And so I think a common thread that I heard in all of you, it definitely was that piece about identity, and definitely the piece about meeting students where they're at and leveraging those experiences. So it does make me think about, right? What should we be measuring, right? So Elisa, you talked about arbitrary expectations, and there's these amazing projects that I hear you doing, yet we still have this measurement of learning loss. And I think I see in my students, they're definitely different or bigger, I don't know, deficits, but they're coming with different knowledge. There's definitely gaps. So, but my students have become more masterful with soft skills like flexibility, resiliency, organization, right? Our students got to see firsthand how society works during a pandemic. They got to see firsthand government responding and not responding to a health crisis, to a national reckoning with racism. So, how do you see that difference between like their soft skills and then there might be hard skills or content? What do you see in your classrooms a difference there? And if so, when we talk about what we should be measuring and what our expectations should be, what do you think our expectations should be? What should we be measuring as educators? Because we should be telling the legislators, like, here's what you should measure. Here's how you tell where our students are at. So what do you think we should be measuring? And we'll start with Anthony.
Great question. I think I heard a presentation recently where they talked about assessment as a whole and being a teeter-totter. So you need a little bit of diagnostic in the beginning to figure out where our students are to kind of triage the game plan. And at the end, you need a little bit of summative assessment to see as a check on the whole system. But I think we need to be careful about over testing our students and adding to that pressure and that experience. But the vast majority of your assessments on teeter-totter are right in that middle, where it's formative assessment. It's the day in, day out things that the teachers use, whether it be district assessments or just in classroom materials and checks and questions. And I think that's really where the bulk of it needs to be, because as our students kind of recoup some of this, they're going to respond in different ways. We see this in students with disabilities and special education. A student who may have regressed over the summer is coming into the fall. Maybe they'll recoup that in a month. Maybe they'll recoup that in 6 months. Maybe they need additional services and supports over a period of time to make up for that. Yeah, sorry.
All right, that's perfect. Thank you, Anthony. How about you, Elisa?
I agree with what Anthony said. And I also believe that one of the things that we really should be measuring is how the students themselves are moving towards meeting their own goals. One of the things that we really focus on as much as we can in our learning experiences here in New Mexico International School is giving students the voice, choice, and ownership over what they're learning, and trusting them also in their ability to set purpose and goals for their own learning, and then also including them in that process of measuring how far they've come towards their own personal goals. And so that also becomes much more individualized, but a lot more meaningful for the students themselves. And it goes back into that asset base. They know where they're coming from. They know where they want to go. And the teachers, we're here to help guide them in that and provide structure to the learning. But also, I believe we should be measuring according to what they want to be learning as well.
Thank you, Elisa. I really like that concept, right? It's like personalized learning, especially. All right. So Cindy, how about you? I mean, you guys do a lot of different projects, and I know that it helps in all different ways, but what should we be measuring?
Well, I think in terms of if we're looking at this from a literacy lens, I feel like we need to be continually mindful that literacy is reading, speaking, writing, and listening. And oftentimes we're asking students to read and answer a multiple choice question when we're on high stakes testing. And that does not account for the types of real world reading that we're asking our students to do. So how can we value the work that, like Anthony and Elisa were both saying, like the in-person formative assessments and the ways that we summatively assess our students in our classrooms to measure progress and determine next steps? And how can we include those pieces? And we also have to consider that our country as a whole, even Maine, like we have so many linguistically gifted students, and we're asking them to show their knowledge in just one language. And I think we just need to consider all the individuality of our students and really be thinking about the ways that we have, the beautiful ways that we're assessing our students, where they can also see their assets and all those different pieces. It's just we need to really be pooling all of our knowledge together, looking at the research, and making a forward path that celebrates our students for everything they can do.
Thank you, Cindy. I mean, I think that what you guys are all three of you are saying is that our students are so much more than a snapshot and a reading score or a math score, that are who our students are and who they want and who we want them to be when they graduate is a multiplicity of things and in a very rich environment that they learn them. So I think we might have some questions from the audience. We'll see. Carol, I don't know if we're going to have some questions. Okay, so here we go. We have a question from participants. Now, because I'm going to let you guys kind of unmute and go as you want. All three of you can answer, just one of you. So I don't want to put you on the spot with an on the spot question. Okay, so you guys get to choose yourself. So here's the question. How can we help to shift the mentality of community members and parents from focusing on learning loss to focusing on meeting the students where they are at now? What a question. Okay, who would like to go first? I'm going to call on somebody. Okay, Elisa.
I'll start from a big level. I am really cognizant of how much our words matter and how the rhetoric that we use ourselves also makes a really big difference at a broader cultural level. And so I think that one of the places that we can start is really being intentional about the language that we're using when we're talking about our students and talking about the growth that they are making from where they're at, because oftentimes I've seen that the source of a lot of this perception can really be changed depending on the critical mass of the positive and asset-based language that we're using. So one place that we can start is really being intentional about the language we're using and blasting that language as much as we can within the community.
Thank you, Elisa. Anthony or Cindy, did you have any ideas?
I can add to that and just share that I think in all things, if we can listen and really try to understand the concerns, and it does in some cases feel really hard to hear this this narrative. And I did actually write an op-ed is one way that I tried to put a voice out there in my state. I believe somebody might put that in the chat, but I think the more information that we can spread based in response to what we're hearing from our community members. And so when there's questions like learning loss, we need to say, can you tell me more about that? And really try and get down to the heart, because often it's, there's fear, there's worry, and we're all experiencing that, and validating those concerns can really help say, I really hear you. I share those concerns. And let me tell you what this looks like in my classroom for your child. And the more of us that can get that message out there, that they're going to talk to their friends and it will spread, because learning loss is now also shifted into acceleration. And we really have to pause and say, okay, we're not going to put the full throttle on the speedboat here, because we need to slow down. We all are going through a lot, and we need to acknowledge our students and where they're at.
Thank you, Cindy.
I'd also just kind of echo both colleagues. I think in some ways we have to shift it from what they've lost to a growth model, but also just what they've gained. And so we talk about things that they've gained throughout this experience, things we all have gained, and that resilience to adversity. We've all gone through significant challenges, none that we would have chosen, but our students are stronger today in a lot of ways than they would have been otherwise. And so I think focusing on that resilience, that grit, but also on the growth. I think we focus a lot in education on a given standard. Sometimes that standard might be a little arbitrary, but I understand the purpose of moving us forward. But we have to focus on our overall goal. We want all of our students, once they graduate, to be in continuing education, to get a job, to be in service. That's the goal. And so how are we bringing our kids to get there? Because once our kids graduate, they're not all going to be the same. That's not the purpose. If we were all the same citizen, we wouldn't have our communities that we have today. So the goal of diversifying the goal for every student to where they want to go and what our community needs is really the focus. And I think celebrating that growth as opposed to comparing it to a standard norm is really a piece of that.
Excellent. Thank you, Anthony. And I'm just going to briefly add, so all three of the panelists gave brilliant advice. And one way to amplify that, that I encourage my colleagues to do and that I do is I testify to our school board just about great things my students are doing. Now, it can be a little nerve-wracking, I know, but we are the experts. And so we have to drive that conversation. So what we bring to the school board, when we look at the projects my students are doing, look at when we bring all the great things we're doing to the school board, and you have a couple of educators once a month, just testify. Just wanted to share with you, look at all the great things the students have been doing, the opportunities learned during the pandemic. It is harder for people to only focus on what students are missing. Okay, we have another question from the audience. So, could you say some more about the role of social and emotional learning activities and resources this school year for students? Anthony shared a really powerful example. What are some other examples that work? So the participant wants to know more about maybe some specific social emotional learning activities or resources. Anthony, do you want to? Okay, Elisa's going to go first. Good. All right.
In terms of resources, it's definitely teacher created and teacher collaboratively done, but I would like to share a really powerful and specific one that we have started using in a lot of classrooms at our school this year, and that is one of affirmations with a mirror. That's one thing for the students and the families to hear the affirmations from us who we see, but for them to have the power to affirm themselves. For example, in our kindergarten classroom down the hall, there is a mirror for a center with a lot of affirmations in Spanish that the students are learning. So not only are they learning this language, they're looking at themselves in the mirror and telling themselves that they are valuable, that they are worthy, that they are learning. And so just that one small center that these students have, it's self-affirmation at the same time that they're learning some of the academic language, but it's a really powerful way for them to be affirming themselves and who they are and what their worth is.
Very powerful. Cindy?
Yeah, I can add to that. One of the really powerful tools we have at our school and across in every single classroom, we have a calming corner. And I love this because we want to teach students to identify how they're feeling and be able to have a tool or a resource to implement at that time. So each calming corner, we use the zones of regulation. And so each calming corner has some tools with that. Our occupational therapists gave us flip cards that they can do crazy eights and different things they can do on paper by tracing with their fingers and such. And they come in and do at the beginning of the year, teach the students how to use those. There's breathing balls, there's all these different things, crayons, paper. And a student knows that when they choose to, if they feel they can't access the learning or need to go to the calming corner, they may do so independently. And if we observe that they're there for more than 5 minutes, then that's our cue to go over and check in and say, are you ready to get back to learning? And if they say no, we have a plan in place where there's somebody available, one of our social workers or one of our administrators who can go and support that student with some one-on-one processing to help them get back to learning. And it's been really powerful. Students use it really effectively and they do not overuse. And those materials were provided to each classroom through a Donors Choose grant. So there's ways to get these tools and things into students' hands.
Thank you.
And I'll share, I'm coming from an elementary lens, but this activity could really be applied widely, regardless of what age group you're teaching. And it's kind of fitting that we're talking about it on Constitution Day. So this is an activity, every year we start the year with creating a class constitution. So we talk about responsibilities, rules, and rights. And part of those rights are using our sensory tools, taking a break, earning rewards, all of those pieces. And so the students are creating this with a little bit of guidance from their teacher. And then we host elections. So we elect a president or a governor, and then our legislative bodies, and then the Supreme Court is appointed. But But what this does is it creates an ownership of the class. It gives the voice to the students and empowers them to really address the conflicts that they're experiencing. And so, it came to recess, and we had one of our students had some additional needs, experienced a lot of trauma, and so was very reactive to certain situations. And so when somebody was tagging him, he might have had, a really visceral reaction. And so that would upset the other student who thought, well, why aren't we not friends anymore? And so they were able to bring these conversations into the classroom. They would come up and go, oh, we need to do government. And so they would get all their desks ready. And really the student who students didn't really see as a peer in the beginning of the year, at the end was leading some of these discussions and going, oh, that's why you were so upset. Oh, well, here, let's come up with a plan, like we tap softly or we wave instead of tap. And so really just creating a space that's welcoming of all of the kids and letting them process those emotions in a very public way is, in some ways, outside of this experience, a lot of that is kept private. And so just opening up some of those emotional discussions to the whole class. One other thing I would say, part of social emotional learning is that self-identity piece and making sure that our students have representation in our classrooms. And if that's not me in my class, it's including partners from other classes, from other schools, pen pals with other, with other classes that have commonalities or engaging with partners in the community.
Thank you. What a great way to end this session with amazing advice that I'm going to incorporate in some way into my classrooms from all three of you. So thank you. I want to thank you, Elisa. I want to thank you, Cindy. I want to thank you, Anthony. I'm not going to say your last names because I don't want to mess them up, but I want to thank you so much for your work. And I want to say, we know that education is the cornerstone of our republic. And Angela Davis said that we have to believe that we can radically transform the world. And we have to believe that every day. And all three of you clearly believe that. So thank you. Thank you for going out, and thank you for saving our republic. I'm going to turn it over to Carol for the last couple of words.
Okay, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. We've reached the end of our session today, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you to our incredible Teachers of the Year, Amy, Elisa, Anthony, and Cindy, for sharing your insights. We heard some powerful messages about resilience, about creating an asset-based mindset, about meeting students where they are, focusing on voice, choice, and ownership of learning goals. I love that. Self-affirmation, and the importance of community partners. So just really practical advice to use in our teaching practice over the coming year as we embrace new opportunities with students. And we don't know what's to come this year, but we'll be ready. So thank you to all of you. Thanks to our ASL interpreter, Lauren, and our closed captioner. And I'd just like to remind everyone to please fill out the Smithsonian survey, which will give us feedback on this session and the great presenters that we had. You can do this right now by clicking on the survey button on the right side of your screen. It'll also be available through the end of the day, so you can access it from your main dashboard if you can't complete it now. It's only 3 questions. It won't take long, but we really want to hear from you about what you valued about today's session and how the Smithsonian can support you. So with that, we'll say goodbye, and thanks again, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you in the next session.